You're listening to The Andrew Jose Show, your go-to podcast on all things culture, society, and entertainment. According to a study by the American Psychological Association, nearly 40% of Americans reported that politics was a significant source of stress, leading to anxiety, insomnia, and even suicidal thoughts. The constant exposure to political news and polarization has been linked to increasing levels of anxiety and depression. Additionally, a survey conducted by the University of South Florida found that 2/3 of participants identified the political climate as a source of stress, with over a third admitting to conflicts with family or friends due to political beliefs. Americans nowadays are not only divided by the political sectarianism spreading throughout the country, but are also most anxious because of the current political climate itself. As we head to another tumultuous, emotionally charged election this November, what are some best ways Americans can manage politics-related stress and anxiety? Joining me to discuss this today is mental health therapist Colleen Marshall. Without further ado, let's head straight to the interview. Colleen Marshall is a therapist and chief clinical officer at Two Chairs, a series of mental health clinics offering in-person and virtual consultations. Colleen is author of the book Motivational Interviewing for Leaders in the Helping Professions. She was previously director of digital behavioral health for SilverCloud. Colleen also serves as a health consultant for behavioral health and behavior change startups and nonprofits. Colleen Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
In what ways do you see the current political climate, Colleen, affecting the mental health of Americans across different demographics? Are there specific groups that are more vulnerable?
The American Psychiatric Association did a survey and asked adults how they were, whether anxiety was increasing in their lives and what was contributing to that anxiety. And they saw that 73% of the respondents said the election was affecting them and making them more anxious. And so it's actually across the bandwidth. So it's for all different demographics that it's affecting all of us, actually.
Are there any people with mental health conditions that are more likely to suffer acutely from any political-related anxiety from your research?
Yeah, it's more what you've already came into the picture with. So both your lifestyle choices or behavioral choices, like if you're consuming the news a lot and you're someone who's sitting on the couch watching the news over and over, that can increase your anxiety. So it's more of the choices people are making or the behaviors they're engaged in. But if you also had anxiety previously, this can just exacerbate it. It can make it even more. So it just sort of builds on top of the anxiety that you initially had.
Election-related anxiety and political anxiety, what are particular triggers that you've identified?
Yeah, mostly the reason that the anxiety or the election causes so much anxiety for folks is because it's a big decision that you cannot control the outcome for. And so when we feel like we don't have control over something, that can increase our anxiety. So even though we can vote and we can help other people vote and we can do things like campaign to have other people register and drive people to elections, you can't actually directly impact whether or not the candidate that you're hoping will win. And that level of feeling out of control can increase anxiety. And so what we talk about a lot in therapy is being really clear about what is in your control and what is not in your control. And one of the things that is in our control is how we're responding to this and how we are interacting with the news and how we're interacting with the feelings that might be coming up from the unpredictability of what might happen with the election.
Could you elaborate on the role media plays in shaping public perception and anxiety regarding political events? Now, if there's anything this country suffers with, as many critics have identified, is that our media is very sensationalist. It thrives on exaggerating events, making crises appear way out of proportion. How would you say the news cycles are impacting mental health? And if you were to recommend some reforms to the media as someone coming from a mental health profession, what reform and change of approach would you suggest to people working in the media?
Yeah, so what we talk about in therapy is helping people really have balanced perspectives. So when you have an anxious thought, it almost always is, we call it a thought distortion or a cognitive distortion, meaning it's not factual, it's extreme. And so when we're anxious, we believe, we might catastrophize or we might overgeneralize or we might have black and white thinking, things like that. And so one of the things we teach people is how to really take that thought and balance it, challenge it, look at both sides of it, so that you are having a more realistic and factually based thought. The way the media impacts that is if the media also is not balanced, if it's not showing sort of both sides of the perspective, or if people aren't looking at both sides of a situation or the facts, it can exacerbate that sense of catastrophizing or overgeneralizing. And so then people would have to work on their own belief systems and their own reaction to what the media is sharing. So if the media wanted to be helpful, it would just need to be factual and balanced and make sure that we're sharing information in a way that is non-emotional, non-exaggerating, but true, just factually true, but also balanced so that you're seeing the different perspectives, not just one point of view.
In many ways, it is difficult for people to completely rid themselves of election and political anxiety. But like most anxieties, are there ways that people could channel this anxiety in healthy ways? How could they manage, rather, this political anxiety in ways that don't affect their own mental health and in ways that do not affect their interpersonal relationships?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we talk about in treatment and in therapy is setting boundaries. So the first one is setting boundaries about how much are you consuming this material? Are you watching the news all the time? Are you engaging in social media all the time? How much are you letting the election be part of your daily life and your daily thinking? And it's different for everybody. For some people, daily interacting is fine. For other people, that causes more anxiety. So to be really true about what works for you and what's important for you. And then setting a boundary around that about what is the right level of consumption you want of this material. Also, that means setting boundaries with the people in your life. So you have people in your life that either want to talk about this all the time or maybe disagree with you on your point of view. Really setting boundaries around what's okay for you. So maybe you might say, let's go to dinner this weekend. I want to have a nice time with y'all. But let's just agree ahead of time not to talk about politics or the election. I just want us to talk about our lives and how we're all doing. And I know we disagree about politics or the election, And I don't want that to be our dinner conversation. So things like that where you can set boundaries around how often you're consuming the material, but also how you're interacting with others. And then there's things that you can do just to manage your mental health, like doing things that bring you joy and bliss and balancing that with things that cause you the stress. Is also doing things like making sure you get enough sleep every night. 7 to 8 hours is recommended for adults. Making sure you're getting exercise, getting outside in nature, doing things like that so that you're balancing the anxiety as well.
This election cycle particularly is a very emotionally charged one, with both candidates and both parties making it a decisive moment in American politics. In such a climate, what signs would you suggest that friends and loved ones keep track of when interacting with people who are either politically anxious or express tendencies to act out political violence?
Yeah, so I think mostly what you'd want to look at is if you're noticing that your loved one is acting different than they used to act, and or that you're seeing some of this anxiety impact functioning. So if you're seeing it impact your relationships or their ability to go to school or go to work, or even just getting daily life tasks done, if you're seeing it sort of consuming them or coming up in a way, it's always a good time to talk about what you're noticing. Say, the person, I care very much about you. Here's what I'm noticing. How can I be helpful? And if you're really concerned about their safety or someone else's safety, it is important to seek help, including calling in, law enforcement if needed, to make sure that you're keeping the person that you care about safe and you're keeping other people safe too. So really asking questions and leaning in and talking to the person to make sure that they know you care, that you let them know what you're noticing, what you're worried about, and then also see how you can be supportive and get them help.
Before we go to the next set of questions, Colleen, I wanted to ask what ways and how people can get help with election or political anxiety related issues with your clinic and with Two Chairs. Could you just share with our guests some of the resources that Two Chairs offers and you as a mental health practitioner offer as well?
Yeah, for sure. So you can go to www.twochairs.com and you can actually sign up for your first appointment right there. We're in 3 states right now: California, Washington, and Florida. And we do take insurance too, and that's all on our websites. And the way our process works is you start by seeing a licensed therapist who listens for what you're coming in to care for. And they'll do a screening, but they'll also be screening for what kind of provider is most helpful for you. Because our very first appointment, we want to make sure that we match you to the right therapist so that we're getting you to the right therapist from the beginning. So that's how we start off our treatment, right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. Given the divisive nature of current political discourse, what role do you think mental health professionals like yourself and also people on the way to become mental health professionals in the process of getting their licensing should play in fostering more civil and constructive conversations?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we do couples or families counseling, one of the things we teach a lot is how to have conflict and how to have productive communication and conversation, because they're not just easy skills for some people. So we teach things like I statements and how to share your thoughts without judging someone else's thoughts, and how do you consider someone else's perspective, and make sure you're reflecting that other person's perspective so they feel heard and understood. So some of those skills we teach in therapy, and I think that therapy in general can play a role in helping people manage your own emotional reactions and your own emotional regulation, and teach you some skills to be able to set boundaries and to be really clear about how you're feeling and how you're feeling taking some of these situations coming up. And it also can teach relationship dynamics on how to handle two different perspectives and how different people are thinking about it. So I think there's a lot that therapy can help in this situation if people are needing that level of help. Also just, talking with others, not everybody needs therapy for sure. So even reaching out to loved ones and talking with them too can be useful.
Coming to our last question, Colleen, from you moving away from individuals and looking at society as a whole and culture as a whole, what would you say is unique about this present generation and this cultural climate that we are in that has contributed to this politically anxious but also very divisive climate? Is it the lack of shared experiences and shared spaces, or is it technology and the isolation that came with the COVID-19 pandemic? What are the factors that has affected the psychology of so many different people in this generation?
I don't know that I'm the expert to answer that question, to be honest. I think there's a lot of things where we've become more and more polarized in our thinking and in our discourse and our ability to listen and understand each other. I definitely think the isolation of COVID, was difficult for socialization, especially for younger people that were in school. We've seen, gaps in developmental milestones because of that. But I'm not sure all the factors that go into it, because I also think there's, some historical factors probably that impact where we are and some of the changes and just, how we're thinking about evolving and innovations, and how that sometimes as a society and as a culture, we go through these stages of not wanting to evolve when technology makes changes, like we saw, in other historical times too.
And one thing people have criticized, particularly political scientists, has been people who tend to be chronically online, who spend vast amount of their days on Twitter. From your knowledge, how would you say that, spending time online and social media extensively kind of affects someone's psychic well-being?
Yeah, we definitely know that more contact with social media increases anxiety and can also, hurt. Like for example, with younger people, can really hurt their sense of self or their self-esteem. So it is something to be moderated and to be reduced, and to really engage in a real life interaction with others, because we do need human contact, and we need to really. There's a lot of research about isolation impacting our mental health. So reaching out and spending time with people in a live way is definitely recommended. And also, social media can slant what you're seeing. It's designed to send you information that supports things you're interested in. So that thing we were talking about before about having a balanced view, it can be hard to do that on social media, because you might be getting just messages with one perspective. And it's really important to keep the balanced perspective to help our mental health and make sure that we're seeing things more clearly.
Ladies and gentlemen, you just listened to Colleen Marshall, therapist and chief clinical officer at Two Chairs. Colleen Marshall, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to The Andrew Jose Show. If you have not already done so, please subscribe to us on Substack at andrewjoseshow.substack.com. We are also on Twitter and Instagram at Andrew Jose Show. Also, make sure to follow us on whatever podcast streaming platform you're using to listen to this podcast to not miss out on any new updates from this program. Thank you so much, and this is your host, Andrew Jose, signing off.